this on really quick. I have my notes here, if you don't mind. I'm gonna try to just talk with you all normally instead of, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that. But I do have notes in case I get off course to keep me on schedule. So thank you again for having me today. First of all, I would like to start off with, I know a lot, well, I believe, as someone who was a Dem and an independent and not really a Republican, so all I know really is from the outside looking in, and what I've been told about Republican women is that you're not feminists, and you might not even believe that women are an oppressed class. You don't believe maybe that we even need protections as sex class. But I believe that if that's true, after I'm done speaking here today, that you might understand why our civil rights protections are absolutely so important. I believe that they are under attack, and they are under attack by the far left. I would say the far left simply because I don't believe most liberals and most Democrats even agree with this at all. Polls are showing that men and boys in girls and women's sports is like 70% against it. Most people strongly agree with single-sex sports for women and girls. I don't believe that this has anything to do with transphobia. Usually, I warned you about even publicizing my speech today because I was afraid that there was going to be a big protest or something like that, because usually when women gather to talk about this topic, we are protested. We are shut down, we are silenced, women have been fired, women have lost their positions in doctorate programs, and this is real life happening right now in 2021. This has nothing to do with hating people who are gender nonconforming. I do not hate people who are gender nonconforming. I consider myself to be gender nonconforming at times. I flow more masculine at times or more feminine at times, and I think that that's a really good way to understand what gender identity even is. Think of it as people, what sexist stereotype a person relates to most, because that's really all it is. It's what in their head, what they believe is a woman, what they believe is a man. And I will say, as a woman, I don't feel like a woman, I just am one. And I think that that is one of the biggest conflicts in this gender ideology versus, is sex real? A lot of trans activists are going to say that it is not. They call sex a social construct now. And this is being taught in our schools. This is being taught in public schools. It was taught in my child's biology class of his freshman year. He was shown a Teen Vogue clip saying that the sex binary, man and woman, is bullshit on his first day of class. This was Denver Public Schools. So I would like to also say, she mentioned I'm a walkaway. I have very liberal beliefs for the most part, and so on many other topics we're probably going to differ. But I'm here and I really appreciate being welcomed by the Denver Republican women. Thank you. I'm going to grab my water really quick.
It's pretty dry, isn't it? I'm sorry, can I ask you what grade your son was in when that was presented? Freshman in high school?
He's a freshman, but also an honors student. So this was freshman honors biology. So I got started on this topic and publicly speaking out about it. It's affected my business. I've been blacklisted from the cannabis community. Nobody will do business with me anymore from the cannabis community. Everybody's mostly liberal in the cannabis community, so that makes a lot of sense. But they call me names. I've been threatened. My family's been threatened. I've been publicly humiliated by people in positions of power, such as Tate Anderson. I was told to commit suicide. I was told that they hope my baby died when I was 7 months pregnant. And this is what they consider the culture of acceptance. And so you can see why I walked away from the Democrat Party. 6 years ago, I was online in the community that I cherished. It was a community of mothers. My child was a baby. My second youngest was a baby herself. And I very much needed this community. And we got in a discussion about transgenderism. And at that time, I think I still believed transgender meant transsexual. I didn't realize at the time that people who are transgender, and when I say people, I'm mostly speaking of men because that's where the conflict is. Women who identify as trans are not really the topic of concern for women because they're women. And I think that that's a huge issue right there, so I'm going to back it up just a little bit to definitions. We have a major communication issue with the gender community because, and they want that. They want us confused. They want us to not be able to talk about this and to understand what's going on. So, when they say these policies are anti-trans, that is a lie. They're pro-women and girls. No boys or men are being prevented from playing sports. They're being told they must participate in the class for their sex. I want to be very clear about this because the media is lying. The ACLU is lying. I can pull up tweet after tweet from the ACLU that tells you right now that trans children are under assault, that we do not love trans kids. And it makes me angry because I don't hate anyone and I certainly don't love any child less. I've been a child advocate my entire professional career. It's part of what I went to school for, to help oppressed classes. And so I am not a hater. I'm not a transphobe. I am a women's rights and child advocate. So back to how I got started, I learned quickly that it was not an acceptable position to say that we did not want trans women in our shelters, in our rape shelters, in our sports. Lesbian women are actually some of the first group that came under assault. I don't know if anyone's heard of the cotton ceiling, but the cotton ceiling is something that Planned Parenthood put on to encourage and teach men who identify as trans, and from now on I will only say men who identify as trans just for the record, because I think trans woman, it does confuse people, and people say the acceptable slogan from the Democratic Party is trans women are women. And the ACLU has testified before multiple state legislatures right now that trans women are women, that trans girls are girls, and so that there is no distinction between biological females and biological males for the sake of sports under Title IX. This is like really, really important because the whole reason Title IX was created was for girls and women's opportunity. And that goes back to why I was stating originally, you have to kind of care about the civil rights of women and girls to care about this topic at all. So when I found out that it was no longer acceptable for rape shelters to just be women only and that we had to allow men in, it just blew my mind. And I went down this crazy rabbit hole of trying to figure out what's been going on. Where have I been? I've been sleeping or something. I thought I was very educated and aware, woke. I thought I knew what was going on. I didn't. I had no idea what was going on. I was ostracized from the community. I was told that I wasn't allowed to be basically a Democrat or a liberal or anything good anymore. Now I'm a bigot. Now I'm a racist. I've been called a racist publicly, which I'm like, I don't know how that comes in because I'm talking about sex, and now they're bringing up color.
That's for everything. That one just makes me,
Let's just pile it on, correct. So the last time when I spoke, just briefly last month, one of the questions I was asked was, where are all the feminists? And I think it's where are all of the feminists? And I think it's a very interesting and good question. But we've been here. I've been fighting this for 6 years, and when I say that, it's been publicly, and it's been against men, and a lot of children, a lot of adolescents, but also a lot of women who will lie to your face and tell you that sex doesn't exist. Sex does not exist, that men can be women. I'm going to list a few very important women and groups that you can find on Twitter, most of your social media, most of them have their own websites. Emma Hilton is a developmental biologist that I love to follow. She's just witty and wonderful, and she's given a lot of great speeches.
What's her name again?
Emma, E-M-M-A, Hilton, H-I-L-T-O-N, and she's at Fond of Beatles on Twitter. She's great. She tweets about this a lot.
Is she anywhere else?
I mean, she's on YouTube. She's given a lot of speeches for other organizations, but her main platform is Twitter, and I think she's published, so you'd have to actually seek out her published works. But Save Women's Sports, which was founded by Beth Stelzer, is a nonpartisan organization that is just rocking the United States right now. She is using her own money and raising the funds to travel from state to state to state to testify for women and girls right now. As a matter of fact, I have a clip that I will show you in just a little bit that from one of the representatives at North Dakota, who she helped get on our side. We've also got Partnership for Ethical Care, the Women's Partnership for Ethical Care. This organization is protesting in front of gender clinics all over the United States. I don't know if you're aware, but we've got like 300 of them now.
That's my question, yeah, wow.
And they are absolutely transing children. They are giving them very dangerous drugs. They are cutting off the healthy breasts of teenagers. This is happening in the United States. Do not let people lie to you. The ACLU says this is reversible. A lot of these people are sterile. They've never had a sexual relationship. And there are starting to be young adults that are pissed off that they were not given the proper education about what would happen to their bodies, or that they were trusted to make this decision. Another name to look up, Kyra Bell. The Who is Kyra Bell movement. She recently won a court case in the United Kingdom. And so the UK is leaps and bounds ahead of us. Their feminists are working to reverse basically the laws that they started. So they were the liberals that started pushing this on everybody, and now that they've seen what's happened, they're like, oh my gosh, we made a mistake. So on that note, Kelly Jean Minshall, AKA Posey Parker, she is well known, UK woman just tearing it up. She's standingforwomen.com. We've got the Women's Liberation Front, the Women's Human Rights Campaign, the LGB Alliance. And I look at you, Valdemar, because I think that we really need to connect with them as the Republican side of the LGBT community. They basically broke from the trans community because they don't believe that they have the same agenda anymore. I mean, with the trans community talks about being born in the wrong body, and gay, lesbian, and bisexuals have always talked about being born this way. So that's like a big difference between the communities right there. And also, I would like to say I don't think the gay, lesbian, and bisexual community has ever really wanted to force our way of life on everyone else. We want it to be accepted. But that is not what's happening from gender ideology. They want everyone to speak like this, to believe like this, to talk like this. Pronouns in the bios, normalize pronouns, put it in schools. Let's see, Selena Soul and her parents, they're from Connecticut, they're suing on behalf of girls. The ACLU hates them. J.K. Rowling, I know she's not been a favorite of Republicans in the past, but she has been in the forefront fighting for women and girls right now, and the bigotry and assaults against her as a woman, the death threats, I mean, you just have to go to her Twitter page. She's talking about children's stuff, and in the comments, it's FUB and just die.
So J.K. Rowling supports women and girls
Absolutely.
against trans women.
Yeah, she wrote an essay about it.
That's wonderful.
She wrote an essay about it last year and just got annihilated. And
Basically, she just stood on biology.
that's it. All she said is she didn't say we hate anyone. She said the same thing I did. She's like, love who you love, be who you want to be, express yourself the way you want to express yourself, but women are women and girls are girls, and we are not men and we are not boys.
Right.
Period. So let's see. I think we'll bring on Kara now. She should be here.
Yeah, she's messaged you a couple times.
Oh no, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we have consent to film and record.
Fine now?
Hi.
Hi, it was just that I couldn't hear you when you were facing in the other direction. You were just kind of going in and out, but it's not a, hi everyone, hi. It's not a technical problem. I can hear just fine.
Wonderful. Hi, Kara. I don't want to take too much of your time, so I've kind of been explaining what all of this is about. I was planning to show your clip from the Women Picket DC speech before you came on, but I didn't get a chance to, so just go ahead and say what you'd like to say, and I'll show that after.
Okay, sure. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's difficult to know where to start. As I said a minute ago, I was kind of going in and out as when she was facing you, so I'm not exactly sure what she covered. But I guess what I could start with, if it's helpful by way of background, I represent the Women's Human Rights Campaign. I serve on the steering committee of the U.S. chapter. It's a global organization that works to promote Women's Declaration on Sex-Based Rights in law globally. And I'm happy to provide a link. Anyone in the world can sign it. It's a nonpartisan entity globally. And part of that is because obviously different countries have different parties. There's no way to be a global partisan entity. But it's also because we really are interested in transcending the notion that protecting women's sex-based rights is a partisan issue. And on that, I'll draw your quote that I have been really thinking about since last November when I read it. A UK-based feminist, Louise Perry, who says that there are, and I'm just paraphrasing, I'm going to get it wrong, but basically she says, there are enough similarities among women to create a coherent set of political interests. And I love that phrasing because it's very clear that we don't have to agree on everything, and in order to have a movement to protect women's sex-based rights in the law, we don't have to. We have enough similarities among women, all women, biological women, to create what Louise calls a coherent set of political interests. And I really like how she phrases that, because this is a political fight. So, by way of personal background, speaking solely for myself, because Women's Human Rights Campaign is nonpartisan, I registered as a Democrat at the age of 18. I've never not been a Democrat, and I remain a Democrat. However, I do so primarily so that I can say, when I speak in public, that I am a Democrat and I am wholeheartedly against the enshrinement of so-called gender identity ideology in U.S. law as a Democrat, and I'm willing to take that stance as a Democrat. Otherwise, I probably would have left my party by this time because I am so disgusted by what my party is doing along these lines, by enshrining so-called gender identity in law and policy. I started my career as an attorney after graduating from law school and clerking in federal court. I became a public defender, and I spent nearly 20 years working in what is typically called the progressive criminal justice reform community. I worked at the ACLU. I did hear Jeanna mention the ACLU in this fight. I worked at the ACLU on criminal justice issues from 2012 to 2014. Now, because of public statements that I have made on gender, no one from the ACLU will talk to me. None of my former colleagues will have anything to do with me. And I left the ACLU to go to New York to work at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I ended up leaving that consultant doing criminal justice things while getting more and more active in the radical feminist fight, specifically against gender identity, although we're involved in lots of radical feminist fights. This is the one that's most pressing. And at this point in my career, I have basically been completely alienated from the so-called progressive criminal justice reform community because of my stance on gender. And if that doesn't make sense to you, that would be completely understandable, because this whole thing, as Jenna said, is absolutely nonsensical. So that's where I come from in terms of my political background and professional background, and I am absolutely committed to working with women across the political spectrum. I actually think of it these days as just going beyond the political spectrum entirely, and I'm absolutely committed to working with women who want to work to protect women's sex-based rights in the law. So that's me. I'm happy to answer any questions either about me and what I do or about the topic more generally. There are a lot of directions the conversation could go in. We could talk about, as Jenna mentioned, the sterilization of children, which is horrifying. And as she said, it is happening. We could talk about what the Biden administration is doing on this topic, or we could talk more at a state and local level. I don't know if you have things going on in Colorado or locally in Denver that you'd like to talk about. I'm happy to go in whatever direction you'd like to.
Does anybody have a question for Ms. Dansky specifically? I'm going to turn to over here. Go ahead.
Thank you for joining us. Oh, I think you have to unmute it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I am so sorry. Of course I do. Okay. And if she can't hear you, I'll just relay, but go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. This topic and others bring up the fact that because of what's being imposed on us by the current administration and the Congress and wholesale other political organizations, it now looks like it becomes a struggle for states' rights to stand up and be able to make some change in support of the broad-minded thinking we're talking about here, where women are women, girls are girls, etc. Do I have it right that after the transgender announcement from the administration that there were 5 states who already passed laws banning transgenders from women's sports?
Specifically on the topic of sports, my understanding is that 3 states have passed laws. I believe it's Idaho, Mississippi, and Arkansas that have passed laws to protect women's sports. Now, I want to be careful about language here, because the laws that have been passed are often cast in the media as banning certain students from athletics. That is in fact not the case. Not a single one of these states bans any student from participating in athletics. What these laws say is that students have to participate. If they want to participate in sports, they have to participate on the teams that align with their biological sex. Okay. And they do it in different ways, but none of these state laws ban anyone. Okay. The other thing I just would take the opportunity to say is I really want to encourage specifically Republican women to just stop using the word transgender. Just stop it. Stop using the word transgender and stop using the word trans women, because we're talking about men. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that we're talking about men and boys. And so many of us have just been, beaten and assaulted with this notion that we have to accept the idea that certain men and boys are actually women and girls. We don't have to. We can just say we're talking about boys. So what the laws do is say that if a boy wants to participate in sports, he can participate in the boys' teams.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
So how would you refer to trans? I say men identifying as women. Is that how you would suggest that we talk about trans? I don't even know trans women. Does that mean that that's a male that's transitioned to female, right?
Well, there's no such thing as a male who's transitioned to female.
I get that. So you would use, I've not used that terminology because it's utterly confusing. And so I say men that identify as women. Is that what you would suggest that you do when you're talking to people?
sometimes say men who claim to identify as women, or men, yeah, that's, yeah. And the other thing that I sometimes do in writing, and you saw me use air quotes around gender identity, I'll use quotes. If I want to say so-called trans women or something like that, I think that that comes across fairly effectively in writing, using quotes. But yeah, men who claim to be women or claim to identify as women, I think works. But we should not be afraid to say that we're talking about men.
I'm not. My next question is about the law that's passed in California.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
Sorry, I'm bringing her to you.
So my next question is, and I don't know enough about this to be accurate, is the law that is passed in California that allows them to do the medical for students without telling their parents.
So that exists here in Colorado as well.
It has passed here.
Well, we have, I'll be more clear about that. Let Kara answer you, and then I'll talk about Colorado. Kara, could you answer about what's going on in California? I guess maybe talk a little bit about what they're allowing in schools, but also with the prisons. Can she? Is she muted? Did I lose you again?
The sound went out for a minute.
Sorry. So she was asking about California specifically.
Sorry, I can't hear.
She was asking about California specifically, and she wanted to know about how children are able to transition without their parents' consent.
I don't know specifically about California, but I do know that there are laws that are getting passed in states all over the place that say that if a child identifies as trans, then parents are prohibited, teachers are prohibited from informing parents of that fact. So there's a whole parental rights component of this as well.
All ages, and that is here in
It's really, I think it's really difficult to appreciate the speed and ferocity with which this assault on the rights of women, the rights of parents, the rights of children has happened. A lot of times it's very difficult to help people appreciate that this is happening because it is so unbelievable that it is happening. I was having a conversation the other day with a friend of mine who I've known for several years. She's a very liberal Democrat, and for a while she was very sort of pro-trans rights and all of that, as you know, good liberals are. And I say that facetiously. And I brought her along. I've brought her along over the years, and I've gotten her to see some of the dangers of what's going on here. And I tried to take it a little further, and I said, our medical industry is sterilizing children in the name of this movement. And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, that isn't happening. It is so difficult for so many Americans on any side of any political aisle to grasp how serious this is. It is as serious and bad for women, children, gay men, lesbians, and parents as Jeanna described. It's worse than most of us can imagine. It's hard for most of us to get our heads around just how bad this is.
I think that's an awesome way for her to end that.
In part because it's astonishing.
Yeah.
It's just astonishing what's happening.
Can I ask one more, just real quick?
Sure.
Can you identify, love that word, can you identify why this is happening? I mean, it isn't just about this trans, there's a deeper reasoning behind it. I know it's not a conspiracy, I just want to understand why this is happening.
Kara, you want to go there, follow the money?
In here.
She's asking why is this happening, and I can go into all the theory, but I think that Kara will agree that follow the money is a huge part of it.
True.
There is an astonishing amount of money behind this, and so I can just say, I can also type it in the chat, or Jeanna can tell you, there's a blog called 11th Hour Blog. It's literally the number 11th Hour Blog, and it traces the money for the past several years that is pushing this. And it ultimately comes down to a very small handful of extraordinarily wealthy men who are fueling this. And one of those men is named Martin Rothblatt, born Martin Rothblatt. I don't know how much money he has, but it's astonishing, and he has given billions of dollars to this. Another man involved in this is a man named John Stryker, Stryker, and Mr. Stryker founded something called the Arcus Foundation, Arcus, and he stands to inherit a multi-billion-dollar medical supply company.
Oh, God.
So,
Here in Colorado, there's
does
a
it
connection.
to reason that a medical supply company and the pharmaceutical industry as well would benefit from putting who knows how many children on a lifetime's worth of sterilizing and harm-causing hormones.
Right.
It's really that insidious. John Stryker in early March donated $15 million to the ACLU for this cause.
Thank you so much. You're awesome, Kara. Thank you so much. Everybody's saying to please keep up the good work, and I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Bye. Thank you. Take care.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, anything you'd like.
Just to take it, and I don't, I don't want to get too conspiracy either, but I mean, do you think that at the end of the day, getting big pharma, and, it's power and money, do you think it even goes a layer deep? We all know how the secular family is getting just scrutinized every day.
Yeah.
Does it just fall in line too with the...
I have some big conspiracy theories if you really want to go.
No, it's fine. I will be here till 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
But does it have also something to do with the ultimate goal of depopulation, do you think? Or...
I think for them, things that these men have written about and stated publicly, they do believe in a transcending of the human race.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the first part of it, and it doesn't start with just all suddenly they do this. It's a whole societal change in the way we talk, the way we think, and what we believe.
Okay.
And to separate the child from the family, it's absolutely happening. A man got yesterday 6 months in jail because he refuses to go along with, and this is in Canada, but if you don't think that this is coming here,
Oh, yeah.
this is what they want here. And so he got 6 months yesterday in, I think, prison, I want to say, but for basically stating that his daughter is a daughter, and he won't go along with the gender ideology stuff. I know I've been talking. If anyone has any questions, please just jump in, and then I'm going to just quickly go through the rest of the little stuff that I have. Go ahead.
So if we wanted to take a step further in the way that they are actually dismantling our social order, that means that this is also a way of dismantling religion.
Absolutely, although I would say that this is the new religion. I mean, it's substituting that need that humans have for a belief system. Every part of this is faith-based. To believe that a man can even feel what it is to be a woman is a faith. I mean, and I call it the religion of gender ideology, to be a turd, but it is, to me, the truth that it is a religious belief system. And it's...
So they're a cult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We do call them a cult, and I say we, the feminist group of women that I'm around, we definitely call them a cult, and it is because there is no... They say it's based on science, but even they manipulate the word of science. I mean, if you don't believe that there's male and female, we're talking about a disbelief in evolution.
Sure. And they want to globalize religion just like everything else, so if they can get enough people
To their religion.
believe in what's
I mean, everything that I've talked about today is in the Denver Public Schools toolkit for their LGBT. They talk about the law in 2012, or the court case, in 2012, that changed this for Coloradans. And we've been dealing with boys on girls' teams and in our locker rooms for a decade now. I go to 24-Hour Fitness and there is a man that comes in with a wig, a very obvious man with all the parts and components that goes into the locker room where I go. And to me, I feel like that is very unfair. So now there's a male's locker room, there's a co-ed locker room, and where do I get to go? Because I don't want to change where there are men allowed. But there's nowhere to be said that there's, because they say these people are not men.
So you don't change.
Right. And so that pushes women out of the public sphere, though. So now we're back to having to stay home.
Right.
We don't have a place to go to the bathroom.
This man that wears the wig, he won't go into the, I don't know what I am, changing room, he goes into the.
So that is part, so that's a great question. So that, a lot of us have said, let's have a third option. Let's have a third room changing space. Let's have, I'm not opposed to that. If they're not comfortable going to the restroom or changing with men, let's have a third option. They say no. And the reason why is because they're using women and girls to validate them.
Right.
They cannot be seen as true women and girls if they're not allowed in our spaces. So we are their validation humans now. Doesn't that feel like equality?
No way.
That's what the Democrats are doing. And if we're talking from a political and a policy perspective as Republican women and voting. This is Democrats doing this. It is Democrats putting men and boys into our sports, into our rape shelters, into our locker rooms. In the UK, if you ask for a woman to examine you, you might get a man. And if you get a man who identifies as a woman to examine you, you will be called a bigot if you say, I don't want that person to touch me. And that goes back to what's happening now in California, in Washington. We have female women corrections officers being forced to pat down male genitalia.
Oh, God.
The genitalia of sex offenders. The genitalia of male sex offenders who get off by being touched by women who don't want to touch them. This is being forced on these women by the state. And they're being risk of losing their job if they speak out. This is happening in 2021, and why I was so eager to speak to you all, and I'm so thankful that you allowed me the chance. If anybody has any other questions.
Yeah, let's do Q&A for a while. Go ahead.
Is there any place amongst the different sources you were quickly naming where they've got a list of the kinds of things that are taking place? Facts?
Where would I go for that? I think that where I would tell you to go for the, what she talked, the 11th Hour blog has a great resource for why is this happening and following the money, but also Women's Liberation Front. They're the legal aspect fighting this across the United States right now. So they have tons of resources on their website, and they go by WOLF, W-O-L-F, Women's Liberation Front. And almost every single one of the founders is a lesbian, and all of them are women. So if this is, when they want to call you homophobic or a bigot or this or that because of talking about this topic, you have to remember that was lesbians that really started speaking out about it first.
And is it lesbians, and you mentioned people that were radical feminists, where I didn't quite get what they're doing now about this topic.
So radical feminism is just like this whole theory and group of women, and there's so many different ones. Julie Bindel, Sheila Jeffries, Julia Beck gave a great testimony before the state, no, it wasn't state, it was the US Congress about this issue. It was wonderful testimony. It was ignored.
So many are speaking out against this. I find it interesting. So those of us,
Right.
like me, that believes in the traditional family, traditional definitions.
Biological women.
Yeah.
Right.
Real women.
Have a point in common, as you said, with some of these other groups.
Correct.
And we could group together.
And it's something interesting, Gloria Steinem is against us. So one of the most powerful and well-known feminists of the 70s now tells girls and little girls that they don't have a right to girls' sports and that men can be women. Heartbreaking to this.
But no is strong enough that she opposes this. I mean, she's still a Democrat and she's still, voting for everything that supposedly she's against. And that is the big problem. Because you cannot get a coalition, with a group that you don't identify anymore.
Right.
So and part of all this is just part of the UN plan of, one.
One world order. I hear you.
Yeah.
It's definitely distracting. I would love to be working on other things. My entire youth, I was an activist all through college, all through high school, my early career, and I've been stuck doing this for 6 years. I would love to move on. I don't want to do this anymore. I would love to work on real problems and real policy stuff, but I feel like I can't because, the Democrats totally abandoned the women's rights issue.
Yeah, they're destroying everything.
Everything.
Everything, because it's an attack to family, any kind of institution, religion, family, and the family, because families are the pillars of society. Everything begins there with family. So, the union of a man and a woman, that is so important, and then, the procreation of kids, and that's what makes society to be. And this doesn't have any biological, basis, no scientific basis, because after all, you need a man and a woman to procreate. And a man cannot carry, a child.
And that is a controversial statement today.
Yeah.
Because what she just said, she will be called a TERF, she will be called a bioessentialist.
No, why is it controversial to say?
And that is okay. I don't care, and
I don't care either. Thank you, I'm glad you don't care.
Because I don't want to be proper, I don't want to be politically correct. I have the right as a minority, I learned that 3 times.
Right.
And I have the right to stand for what I believe in people, and that's one of the problems that we're having right now. People don't stand for the rights. Everybody's just taking, okay, well, maybe we can change it, No. And if you don't stop it now, you will never be able to.
I agree with
I
that.
have a question about schools. So for those of us that have children in schools, how do we get around, what are you doing? Are you following the agenda of school and saying, okay, they're going to be taught this, when they come home we're going to have a conversation, or what are you doing? So my friend is not taking her child out of that class because then she's going to hear about it at recess. And I say recess because she's in kindergarten, and that's where they start in Washington. Is the first year. So
you should see some of the books that
I
we're
don't know what
reading.
to do. So I'm just wondering what it is that you're
In
doing.
Colorado too.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's why I'm asking. What do we?
Colorado is one of the states leading the nation, in transgender ideology, or what we call gender ideology, indoctrination, period. We've gotten kudos from other state representatives, Denver Public Schools, on their implementation of transgender inclusive policies, okay? So they use this language a lot to trick people into we're just being kind, we're just welcoming everyone, but it's the opposite of kind, it's the opposite of building community. I was told by Denver at-large director, to move. So I don't agree with that though. I think that pulling our kids out of the schools and ignoring the public schools is the problem, because it just becomes that they become the policymakers. I mean, Tay Anderson, for example, we all know and just can't stand the guy. He is a product of Denver Public Schools. He was indoctrinated in a class at Denver Public Schools that was run by Candy Cedarbacca on how to be a politician, right? So they were grooming him as a young man to eventually take over. And now his belief system and his policies are being pushed on all of us, all of our kids. So to sit there and say that we can just pull our kids out of public schools and ignore it it's not realistic. These kids are becoming our leaders and then making policies for all of us. So I think that public schools is one of the first places we should be hitting the hardest. Showing up to the meetings, telling them no, refusing to participate, calling out the teachers for having the pronouns in their bios. that is a form of coercion, right? If you get a paper from your teacher or your syllabus and they have the pronouns in the bios, or if your superintendent is saying you're not a good person if you don't use pronouns, we should normalize them, which Tay Anderson did say, that's a problem. That is not giving people their freedom of speech, their freedom of beliefs, and their freedom of political affiliation. It is teaching children to align with a certain type of people from very young. And so I think that's going to be one of the first places, that's one of the first places I started attacking, and I hired a lawyer to take on Denver Public Schools, and I haven't gotten very far with it, but I'm not giving up. And I think the more of us that push back, that was part of my problem, is I needed like a community of moms, you know, that we're gonna say, we're not accepting this, we're not allowing this, you know. But every single one of the elected officials on the Denver Public School Board is liberal. Every single one of them votes blue.
Sorry for my not.
Please do not apologize.
But tell me about what this pronoun stuff is. I don't know.
Thank you. So that's how I was gonna.
You're not a she.
Yeah, I was gonna start off my whole presentation with definitions because, again, I think that that is part of the key to understanding any of this, is that there's a whole language behind it. There's a whole way that they speak to each other to help them identify you as a belonging person and to identify them as someone who is safe. Okay, so you have to really be aware of that. Like, for instance, let me see if I saved that picture. I think I did.
They don't use him and her, they use their and its.
No, I didn't. So there was just a picture today on Instagram that said, if you're, like, basically like, F your mom, I'll be your mother. And it was all the rainbow. And this is where I feel like it's really bad for our community and like Pride and the LGBT community, because they're doing it under this guise of inclusivity, diversity, belonging, and everything that the gay community works so hard for, and they're just destroying it. And I speak for that as a member. I'm bisexual, so I don't like to go and tell everybody, but I feel like I have to. And even Denver Public Schools made me. I wrote a letter as a parent that I do not agree with this, blah, 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 and they basically called me a homophobe. And I'm like, no. My concerns transcend my sexuality, and my sexuality shouldn't have had to be disclosed for me to be able to give me an opinion that is taken seriously by the school board. So that's when I hired a lawyer.
Can I just say right what you just said?
Sure.
Chadwick Moore, who is on Twitter, and he's a gay Republican, tweeted, and I captured the tweet, I can't find it, and he said, think about this. Transgenderism and gender-affirming psychology is the epitome of gay conversion ideology, because they're changing them back to a male-female relationship. It's so bizarre to wrap your head around.
So one of the little kids that's been, you know, pushed on the society to make us feel sorry and guilty for knowing that sex exists is a little boy with long blonde hair. He's just now entering the 4th grade. I believe he was used by Elizabeth Warren when she was on the presidential trail. I can't remember, I think his name is Kit, but anyways, he believes he's a girl. He's been lied to by everyone in his life since he was a tiny child that he can change sex, and that everybody that is telling him he can't change sex, we're just a bunch of bigots and we hate him. He testified yesterday or the day before, and I want to say it was in South Dakota, but there's like 30 different states where this is going on right now about the sports issue, so forgive me if I got that wrong. But his mother is on record, videotaped, saying that she would spank him if he would act feminine and was afraid of him being gay. She converted him to this trans ID, and now he's not a gay boy, he is a girl. And this kind of stuff is happening. So right now in the state of Colorado, they're trying to pass HB 1108, which is changing the definition of sexual orientation.
So we need to write into our local legislature.
I-
Let them know.
They're not gonna listen.
You know what,
I want to test the LGBT community. You know, I feel like we have to do more than write letters. They're ignoring us. I've written Hickenlooper. I actually have a meeting with Senator Michael Bennett like next week or the week after. It took a month and a half, and we still don't have like an exact date. And everyone else that's had meetings with politicians have been utterly ignored. So I don't know, you know, and I feel like just hitting them in every single way that we can and not giving up is really the only thing that we can do.
Yeah.
And I feel terrible to not have a better cause of action, you know, go do this and we'll win. But I've been doing it for 6 years, and we're just making headway. Things are just starting to get to mainstream media where we're able to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's bring up one thing
Sure.
about mainstream. So I didn't see it in prime time. It was something else that I was looking at in a search, but they had, and I'm sure it'll be on television soon enough, but there was a Pantene commercial.
Oh, yeah.
So a shampoo, did you see this?
Yes, I've seen it.
And this is what we mean by the corporate capture.
So, like, you know, we're hearing about Delta, we're hearing about Coca-Cola, you know, and other aspects, not necessarily transgender, but there is a Pantene commercial. And I don't have children of my own, but I have young nieces and nephews, and I just think, you can't even have the television on anymore.
That's right.
Because,
The Babysitters Club, they have transgenderism in the new Babysitters Club. Every single show that you could think of for kids, they're trying to push transgenderism. She-Ra, the cartoon, you know what I mean? Like, it's real.
so scary. You guys could probably find it, but it's a Pantene commercial of 2 lesbian women
Yep.
that have, I don't think this child was more than 8 or 10 years old. He was a boy. And they're showing how he's grown his hair
Yeah.
out.
Yep.
And this is
He's
what I...
now their daughter.
Yep.
And what struck me was that one of the parents said, it was the first time I saw her.
Yeah.
That had been their baby as a boy, but now that the hair had grown out and he was using Pantene, now I finally see her.
And what's different between the sexist stereotype? Like, I'm sorry, I grew up in the 80s with big hair bands. Men have had long, luscious hair for decades, and it didn't make them girls. You know what I mean?
It's all about, you know, Motley Crue and all that.
John Bon Jovi.
It's like they all have long.
They all had long, luscious hair. And I mean, Alice Cooper, like, makeup, but like, whatever. And the gender bending was... I've accepted it my whole entire life. Like, who cares? I'll wear some trousers, like overalls and a trucker's hat some days, and then some days I'm wearing a frilly dress. That's, to me, this is so crazy, the sexism. The absolute sexist stereotypes that you just described, and it's being applauded.
It's going to be in everything we eat, drink, and sleep.
Everything. Well, and this is part of it is because it's become cool. So now, if you talk about TikTok, right? TikTok's like the new social media thing, and when you see kids are on it and stuff, I mean, what they're talking about on there as far as transgenderism, and if you go in there and really like look at the hashtags and see them bragging about having their breasts removed, about taking hormones. We have the person who started the app that children can literally just download on their phone and then have hormones sent to them is a doctor here in Colorado. This started here. So we have to really be the ones to start turning it around.
The doctors own stock and medical companies that are making money off of the...
Absolutely.
I just have one last question.
Sure.
Because I believe that from what I read, Abigail Schreier,
Oh, she's wonderful.
her book that is amazing, and then The End of Gender. The detransitioning that is huge right now.
Yep, that's Kyra Bell.
She's a
She's a detransitioner. She sued and won.
And I see that as being a huge part of this movement.
Absolutely.
To bring light to this.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Do you have somebody in the community here working with you that can speak from a detransition position?
Not yet. I would love to find one. absolutely would love one here locally, but they're scared too, so they're called True Scum.
Is that the name?
Yes, the transgender community wants to silence them because then they have proof that kids don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
So these kids are growing up and are starting to speak out, but the trans community, the trans activists, the big money makers are silencing these now young adults from speaking out about detransitioning. But they are a big and growing movement, and they're not going to be silenced. So please do look up Kyra Bell. And she was in the UK, she won her court case, and now because of her court case, Tavistock, which is one of the top gender hormone giving advisory boards and whatnot, is having to change all of their policies. So it's going to happen. It's just how fast are we going to save these kids? How many kids are going to be harmed? How many women are going to lose their scholarships? How many opportunities are girls going to miss out on? How many women and girls are going to be assaulted in private areas because men are able to exploit the trans policies?
And not just that, but think about a child that knows they come from a secular family, or maybe even not, but like they know what they are. They know what they are. Think about the mental
Yes.
issues
Oh, yes.
going around them with all of this bullshit going on in school. And they know what they are. They're a little boy, they're a little girl.
Oh, yes. I believe this is child abuse on a mass scale.
It is.
Thank you so much.